seeing that the new year is approaching and we have a lot of things to cover, I've dragged myself out of bed to cover DBT08's most controversial deck, Eva. You have been taught to believe that you need a lot of things for this deck. You need a promo which will cost you your mother's organs. You need cards that will literally cost you your entire bloodline. You need cards from O1 that are literally as old as half of the Eva players out there. What if I told you you don't need that anymore? Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Eva here. Today I am back to cover Eva from set 8. Yes, it is true, I am actually back. Why are we doing this? Why in fact are we covering this is because this deck is very different from other Eva deck profiles out there, if you've seen others from set 8. In set 8 you receive a lot of interesting support for research as a whole, but we realized that the barrier of entry to Eva is actually pretty high because of a lot of people out there that keep playing the same deck over and over again. So today we have Faye the 4th.
To people that like different fight, I'm sorry.
We are sorry indeed. Because today we are covering a deck you've probably never heard of before. It's Kaiju Eva. That's right, we are actually mixing Kaijus with Eva, the ones that of course don't cost us support. But at the same time, we still want to play the Eva shell. As people know, Eva started off in set 5 as a deck that was not very good but had a very good shell until it received a really busted promo and a bunch of other busted generics and older generics from our good old-fashioned values on which we used to rely, and thus we have this absolute madman mess of a meta deck that literally costs an arm and leg, a family, and your future children. So today we are actually going to change that with this deck. Our right line consists of Grade 0 Eva, Grade 1 Eva, Grade 2 Eva, and Grade 3 Eva.
So Grade 0 Eva is the best starter to bait people into thinking you're a Gravidia player, but then you're actually an Eva player. So, and the Grade 1 Eva rides on top of the Grade 0 Eva, you search your deck for one research card and you add it to your hand. So in this deck, you have 3 targets. You have everyone's favorite Grade 2 research, the number 1 counter to Varina Espero Idea. You have Tectonic Energy Research, the new research card that we got for archetype, but it's a research card so you can play in Eva. And we have Eva's new specific double rare.
The world is a blue resource lab, and they are all Grade 1, 2, and 3. Means you have a research to play on every turn.
Yes, and we'll go through all of them in their specific ratios when we get into the later in the deck profile. The Grade 2 Eva, when you write on top of the Grade 1 Eva, does the exact same thing. You search your deck for one research card and empty your head. And note that all 3 of these, the Grade 1 and the Grade 2 both have the glitter clause, which is very important if you are playing the expensive version of this deck. But for this version, you do not need to worry.
I mean, you still need it to play Obscurate.
Technically. But actually not really. Because Obscurate's ability, it doesn't really trigger until Grade 3. And then we have of course the bread and butter, your worst nightmare, your Varina player, Eva. So Eva's ability is Counterblast 1. For every research card in your order zone, you look at the top card of your deck, you choose one of them and put it into your hand, and you put the rest to the bottom of the deck. So do note that you do not actually need to reveal the card that you add to your hand to your opponent. So that is hidden information that only you know. So it could be a PG, it could be your Overtrigger, it could be a 50k shield, it could be Obscurate. It can be literally any single card that you want, and you can toolbox anything that you see in the top 3, the top 4, or top 5, depending on how many research that you have.
Or how long you're alive.
Yeah, but which in Eva means you're gonna last for quite long.
Now that you have Grade 1 researchers, you actually get a chance to, increase the card pool, because from set 5 we only had a Grade 2 research, now we have a Grade 1 research. So on Grade 3 you can actually go up to 3.
Yes.
The top 3, which is quite important.
Yes, and then her second ability is a staple for D series decks. Is when she attacks, Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, search her deck for up to one card with Obscurate in its name, call it, and her first ability will give her 5k. So 18k might not be a very good number in D series because it's a very awkward number, so it's 10k shield. But then basically that means that if they want a 2 to pass without a booster behind her, they will need to commit a 20k shield, which means that if they're not playing front triggers, which not a lot of decks in D series actually play the 20k shield fronts, it is a very awkward number to guard. They will have to guard with like 2 draws, they have to guard with a crit, as well as intercept or anything like that. And there are ways to deal with interceptors, as we'll show you later on. So Eva Eva as a grade 3 is very basic. It's very she's just there to be a solid foundation for the rest of the cards, to really dish out a lot of damage. She helps you farm free advantage as well as give you very easy multi attack. And then multi attacker is gonna be very difficult to deal with, especially since we have grade 1 researchers now. Moving on to the rest of our grade 3s, you of course play 3 copies of Persona, right? As well as 1 Eva in the right deck. You play 4 copies of the original grade 3 Obscurate, as well as you play 2 copies of the World is a Blue Research. So we'll get the bread and butter card out of the way. Obscurate is your best card in the deck. It's literally the only reason why this deck is this broken, because this card is so good. It's not even funny. His skill is if you have
3.
If you have one, when he's placed, it's when he attacks. If you have 1 or more set order in your order zone, he gains 5k. If you have 3 or more set orders in your order zone, he gains 10k instead of 5. So he's a 18k beater. But since now it used to be only 18k beater on turn 3, and then only turn 4 then he becomes 23k beater. But now that we have grade 1 researchers that are not only budget, but also we have our expensive options, he can become a 23k beater as soon as you write grade 3, which means that he's either a 15, he's always gonna be asking for 15k shield. And when you see his second ability, you definitely want to be throwing that 15k shield, because second ability is that when he's caught by a card ability, which Eva's second skill facilitates, he gains a crit if you have 3 or more researchers in your order zone.
Which you do, because now you have grade 1 researchers.
Yes. So 23k plus 1 crit on turn 3 when your opponent is most likely either grade 2 or they just committed quite a lot to push you on grade 3 turn. It's going to be very difficult for them to guard, and that's something that they have to watch out for. But you might be thinking, that means they only can put out 1 plus 1 crit attack per turn. Well, that's where the new order comes in.
The World
is a Blue Research. So this originally actually was quite a controversial card, but then upon further reflection, actually this card it's freaking stupid. The first ability is when this card, so this card requires you to have an Eva Vanguard with the glitter ability to be placed in a grade 3 research, which means you can only play on turn 3.
Okay.
When it's placed in the order zone, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck.
5.
Top 5. And you choose 1 card from among them and call it. That's it. It's just Go Paladin. It's just Go Paladin. You choose anything from top 5, you call it, you shuffle.
Yeah.
But in case it wasn't clear enough, that is this is called by a card ability. It's a superior call. It means you can trigger Obscurate's ability to gain +1 crit.
Yes.
And which means that you can have 2 Obscurates with +1 crit per turn, which means it's even harder for your opponent to guard.
You can 0-6 your opponent while he's still on turn 2.
Yes, if they don't have enough shield, because your numbers are hitting for you're hitting for a lot of numbers. Eva shuffles the deck. She takes cards out of the deck very aggressively, which means her likelihood to check triggers is very high. And you're taking out another card from the deck using this. And if that wasn't enough, it has a second ability, which is once per turn, you Soul Blast 1 and you choose 3 researchers on your order zone and rest them. To choose 1 card with the glitter ability and give it 5k.
Now, normally that sounds like a really good skill, because you don't really rest your orders per se, but it kind of clashes a little bit with our Kaiju research, which we'll get into it in a bit. But generally speaking, it's more of knowing when you want to rest your research orders, because sometimes you want to use the Kaiju research order to use its effect. Sometimes you just want a free plus 5k. It's completely free because resting an order does not cost you any board attacks or any additional effects. It's just simply utilizing the space in the order zone. So generally speaking, if you don't want to use it for the Kaiju, you just straight away just use it for this to give a free plus 5k to your already huge and rampant board numbers that you'll be throwing.
Because you can choose either Obscurate, because Obscurate has the glitter ability, or you can choose your Vanguard because Eva has the glitter ability. So you either can make Eva a 23k, or you can make Obscurate either a 20k or 28k, which boosted by 8 is 36. So if you go first, they are most likely going to take the attack. Then you can really 0-6 them.
Which is quite insane.
Okay, well, if you're asking if it's so good, why are we only playing 2 copies? Well, I mean, you can just search it from the right line.
And you can see the rest of the list.
Yes.
For grade 2s, we play 4 copies of Great Fiendish Broadsword Obscurate. This is him in his younger days, before he met his wife. 2 copies of Research Successful, 4 copies of Cyclone Monster, Cyclone Guardian, and of course Eva for the right deck. So Eva for the right deck is pretty obvious. Let's get into the stuff we already know with Research Successful.
Experiment successful is your break is still a good still a good spot removal option for Eva. Is what makes all the Espero Idea players be unable to sleep at night. And its ability is that
good night.
When placed in the order zone, it does not have any restriction. It's just placed in the order zone, draw a card, and you choose one card from your hand and discard it. And if you have 3 or more researchers, you Soul Blast 1, and you choose one of your opponent's rear guards and bind it. So it's very, very simple. It's something that Eva has always had since the very beginning, and while it's placed in the deck, especially the second ability is the bind ability, like Soul Blast 1, like a lot of things in this deck are actually competing for Soul Blast 1 now. Eva Soul Blast 1, the Grade 3 Research Soul Blast 1. There's quite a lot of things that Soul Blast in this deck, so you have to really consider when to use it properly, but it can be very devastating when it does pop up.
Yes.
Yeah. And you also might be wondering, well, it'll be so good, why we only playing 2 copies? Well, I mean,
it still orders at the end of the day, and you still can only play 1 order per turn. You have very high liberal usage of your orders in terms of searching it and getting it, so you can afford to play lesser copies to actually use them. And because you're getting such easy order access with your right line, and then later on with the rest of the deck and all your open decking and your whatnots, it generally is not a concern. You can also play more monsters in the deck, literally monsters, so you can also play the kaijus as well. That's how we came about this list in the first place, when we realized we weren't playing Zorga, we were playing an actually decent deck that uses both orders and regular, unique cards pretty effectively. That's how we came to a conclusion to play 2. If you really want to talk about orders that you can increase though, that would be our next research, which would be Tectonic Energy. That could go up to a 4, but again, it's all up to you when we are presenting this fusion deck profile.
Speaking of Tectonic Energy research, we have our first kaiju that we're going to be showing off, which is Cyclone Guardian.
Cyclone Guardian.
Yeah.
So Cyclone Guardian is a card from Archite, but it's actually one of the most generic and one of the best monsters we have.
So basically, his first ability is that when he's placed, you choose 1 kaiju or monster from your drop zone and you put it into your order zone, which interacts only with which really only interacts with Archite, because Archite puts the cards from the order zone to the bottom of the deck. But it's still a card. It still prevents. It still prevents. Let's say like you're fighting the Fuchimachi Madoka. You can empty out your drop to do stuff. Or
it protects your drop zone by moving to the monster box. Literally, despite the fact that you can't really access it because you're not playing Archite, you're playing Eva. But it saves you from stuff like, for example, you're playing against the Record of Ragnarok decks, which do bind your drop zone. It protects you from stuff
Fuchimachi Madoka.
Fuchimachi Madoka. It protects you from generally anything that can force you to call from the drop zone or use your drop zone against you. For example, the Shiranui Oboro Strike deck set in the year 2030. We are very prepared.
That's right. And then his second ability is very generic for Eva, because it just says when he plays on the Guardian Circle, if you have 2 or more researchers, it gains 10k.
Yeah.
It gains 5k shield. So it's
shield.
a 10k shield in Eva, which basically you cannot go wrong. Like I said in the archive video, you cannot go wrong with 10k shield.
You can just drop this card really early on for early aggression or just for early guarding. As a kaiju, it's very accessible because of the way we built this deck. And you'll see that in terms of shield, we are not lacking in terms of shield.
Now, the thing is that there is a sort of part of contention that you want to play Tecton, because you're worried that you can't see your orders. But Tecton is a fine addition to this deck, but I would say that all he does is search your order,
which was very important back in set 5, because everyone was screwing their lives off just to find their 2 copies of their 4 copies of Research Successful. But we've reached a stage in time where orders are so easily accessible, you don't need this level of search anymore. This is probably the one card that came to everyone's mind when we mentioned this was a kaiju deck profile. But as we tested the deck on and on, we realized that there was no necessity for this anymore because of the way the deck is built. So we can focus more on power plays and more great flashy attacks rather than actually needing this, which is why I came back to cover Grade 2 Obscurate. Grade 2 Obscurate, so long as you have 3 or more researchers in your research zone, he gains 5,000 power and 5,000 shield. So on turn 3, he's a 15k beater and a 10k shield. More of the same, shield to help you compete.
And it's also the same as the Grade 3 Obscurate, which I forgot to mention. Also gains 10k shield.
You didn't mention?
Yeah, it's also a 10k shield if you have an Eva Vanguard. But this doesn't even need an Eva Vanguard to be 10k shield.
Yeah, but you will only play this in this deck.
Yeah.
And then lastly, its glitter skill is when he attacks, if you have 3 or more researchers.
When he's caught by card on the when he's caught by card ability, and then when
which is
caught by
Eva,
card ability.
or the
So it's either
research.
the research or by Eva's ability. When he attacks, if you have 3 or more researchers, when you attack, you will battle all units in your opponent's front row in one attack.
Vermilion Thunderbolt. That's why I'm back. This skill is absolute trash in Eva though, because why did Eva need a Vermilion Thunderbolt? You literally were killing lives with the crit spam of Obscurate, your grade 1 research spam. Why did we have to lean into a Vermilion Thunderbolt? Regardless,
Nirvana, Jiva.
Yes, but that's the reason why I'm back to cover this deck profile. So for everyone wondering why I've put my hand in this ring, it's strictly for this one skill.
Nirvana, Jiva.
But yeah, good luck to all of you buying DBT10. I will see you in hell. Moving on to our grade 1s. Our grade 1s, we play 4 Kaiju PG because we're also playing 3 copies of Tectonic Energy Research and then 4 copies of Megaragao and 1 copy of Eva for the right deck. Eva for the right deck is obvious. We covered this already. Don't have to rehash it, right?
Yeah.
Research Run Order.
So
which is this guy.
Tectonic Energy Research has the ability, like I said in the arcade deck profile, is a very, very, very strong card. But it's not really the bread and butter for Eva specifically, because you have an entire other deck that is reliant on this, and Eva does her own thing. But other than that, it's a great one research that is not gonna cost you an arm and a leg. So since you have it, you might as well play it. Okay. So thing is that when it's placed in the order zone, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and you choose to review up to 2 kaijus from among them. 1 goes to your hand, the other goes to your drop zone.
1 goes to the head.
Yeah,
One goes to the hand.
I mean, this foreshadowing for later. So basically, it means the +1 as well as it lets you deck thin for your triggers, because you're putting a normal. Usually, none of your triggers are kaijus, so you can put normal units to the drop zone. And for Eva, it means you're faster quickening your chance to get the over trigger, which is the only win con
in Brandt Gate.
My favorite win con, Elder Breath. And then his second ability is not really relevant for Eva, but it's good. Is that you can rest this to choose a kaiju from your drop zone and put it into the order zone. So
again, it's like Psycho Guarded. It's the effect that only works for Akite. We may cover Akite in the future. It really is only helpful for Akite, but in terms of actual applications, you just use it to save your monsters from being stuck in the drop zone. Does this really help the deck? No, it's hyper niche, but it's just something we still need to mention. So that is why the blue research order is also really good, because you won't be using this skill 90% of the time. You can just rest it and throw another 5k to your many crit attackers, and that's just really nice.
Yes. And speaking of which, kaijus, we have the best kaiju to search out, which is your Perfect Guard. So this is from the Prison Start deck. It's a kaiju, so it means that you can search it out using Tectonic Energy Research as well.
That's so good.
Yeah, but also generically you can just search it out using Eva's ability. Now
that's what you do with every other card Eva.
Yeah. So the thing is that it is of course not the booster PG. So there are going to be scenarios where you're going to be like, oh, I wish I had the booster PG.
Wish I had Elementus, Sectaria.
No, Sanctitude. It's just for Gen.
Yeah, it's just for Gen.
It's just for Gen. So PG is PG. Besides being able to search it out, there's really nothing else other than it's good. Please run PGs. And of course, we have probably the most confusing option here, which is Magro Grog. So this is a counter charger that we got a set 4. Is a kaiju actually. So you can search it out using Tectonic Energy Research. And its ability is that at the end of that when its boosted attack hits, counter charge 1. So it doesn't say hit the Vanguard, which means that
you can just use this as early as turn 2
Yeah.
for just some good on-hit pressure. It's good on the board, it's a Kaiju research, and it works
With
with
us.
grade 2 Obscurate because it's a Vermilion Thunderbolt, correct? So just like I mentioned in all of my Dragonic Kaiser videos, if you basically just put an on-hit booster behind a Vermilion Thunderbolt, Obscurate can help you counter charge up to 3 cards if all 3 attack hits, 2, 1, or none.
And most likely, your opponent is going to let the rear guard die. So that means you're more than likely going to CC2, which in a deck that is so counterblast heavy. I mean, of course, it's not as counterblast heavy as it should be, you know, with the more expensive options. But, you know, it is still very counterblast heavy. And free counter charge is basically never bad.
It's better than Bombermine because Bombermine is still a -1 no matter how you read it. With this card, instead, you can just keep counter charging as long as your opponent allows attacks to hit. Bombermine is a one-time usage move to soul and it just disappears. You never see it again. So even though you paid about 5,000 yen for this thing, it's a one-time use. I paid about 20 yen for my Kaiju and he stays on the board all the time. He's happier and I get a better HR score.
Yes.
Moving on to our grade zeros. We're playing Eva, grade
Playing
0.
Eva, the grade 0 because you need it for the grade 1. We're playing 3 draw because 10k shield is good.
We're
We are playing
our
8.
favorite
We are
over
playing
trigger.
Elder Breath, our favorite over trigger. We are playing our second favorite yellow card, the crit, and we are playing 4 heal because this card 5 vanguard. So heal, don't have to explain. You know, you really want to heal on this deck. Heals are good. They're always good. Don't play 3 heals. Draws are. I know there's we're probably gonna get a lot of hate for playing draws in this deck because there are certain people that will crucify you if you play draws in Eva, but
You still need pieces though.
because we are playing we're playing such a sporadic number of copies of our research orders, playing draws is important. We don't have the consistency and all the money to afford 4 copies of a very very difficult to obtain promo. So the more chances we have to draw the promo, the better.
But I mean,
the more chances we have to draw any research that we can, the better.
I still do want to highlight though that because of the Eva right line, you will guarantee yourself 2 researchers. You only need 3 to play the game. So basically, you just need to hard mulligan for 1.
Yeah.
Just 1. And then the rest just comes to you naturally. And then you just play the game.
Yes.
So realistically speaking, the draw is strictly purely just out of a need for consistency boost. It's nothing to crucify anyone over. It's strictly just for, we just need to make sure we 100% can play the game. Even if you swap this for fronts, you can still easily find your last research order because you have mulligans, you have draws, and the amount of cards Eva burns through the deck. But it's really just for the sake of being safe, and there's no other reason behind it. And if you ask me, in research, you always need, peer reviews. You always need ways to ensure that your work is safe. Just play draws.
Yes, and for crits, because Obscurate already has crit pressure, there's really no excuse to not also run crit pressure on your Vanguard circle. So that means basically, if you use the grade 3 research and you call a grade 3 Obscurate on main phase, and then you call a grade 3 Obscurate during your battle phase, and you pull a crit during your drive checks, they basically have 3 attacks that have +1 crit on them, and your opponent is going to be very very hard to guard if they are, let's say, like 3 damage, 4 damage.
Yep.
Yeah, so that is the bread and butter of Eva. You just stall the game, deck thin, pressure your opponent and win.
And that wraps up our Eva deck profile with Kaijus, our Kaiju Eva deck profile, I feel like to call it. Really, this deck is nothing more than a statement. It's nothing more than just rechanging the way we look at a lot of things, and in a way it's still good or even better than the original, I would say, because we can focus more on this Kaiju engine, and we have stuff like Perfect Guards being completely, Kaijus as well. We can really cycle through and go through the deck. It's quite insane. There is no argument to say, I don't want to play the effect PGs, I don't want to play a 4th copy, I just don't want to play other stuff. I don't want to, pay so much money for a PR, a Kaiju, or even worse, a card that literally just loops itself over and over. These are all nice and all, but realistically speaking, there are other ways you can build a deck, especially because Eva is one of the 2 decks blessed to actually have 2 right lines worth of support. So frankly, leaning into them and trying them out is no harm at all. If you've liked our research that we've presented here, please leave a like, subscribe, because it helps us out, fund our little stupid more interesting deck profiles. At least I think we're doing interesting research. Do you think we're doing interesting research?
Depends on what depends on how Lord and Savior differ fight opinion.
Alright. Thank you all so much for watching. This video hopefully is released on the eve of Christmas. So for those of you watching on Christmas or next year or whatever, Merry Christmas. Have a good one with your family. Stay safe. We will be taking a break for now, but when we come back, we will be covering a few more 08 deck profiles, including one you won't expect that's not from 08. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.
Merry research.